What's up, Dev Tippers? Hope you packed a lunch today because we're going on a field trip. I'm here in beautiful California on this nice and bright sunny day in front of Zurb headquarters. This is the place where Foundation Framework was born. We're going to go inside, we're going to talk to a few people, the people who make Foundation, ask them a few questions like where did it come from, why did you make it, who's it for, what are the plans for in the future, and a few other questions that you guys submitted on Twitter. So I'm really looking forward to this. Let's get it on. All right, everybody, I'm sitting down here with Brandon, who's the design lead here at Zurb and the foundation lead. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Oh, man, thank you for having me, here at this place.
Absolutely. It's your place, actually.
It is our establishment, but yeah, I mean, you came here, we set a camera up, it was good.
Camera and everything. So can you tell me a little bit about Foundation, like just quickly the elevator pitch?
Foundation is a responsive front-end framework. So it's responsive in the way that it helps make sites that adapt to screen sizes. And it's used anywhere from quickly producing prototypes to final production websites.
And how many people, do you know how many people have used it, or at least how many downloads?
I can't tell you that in any stretch of the imagination right now. I would love to have known that, but I actually don't. But it's a ton of people, a lot of good sites on it. We know, like Vans.com is built on it. We know, everything that Zurb produces is built on it as well. And a lot of contributors on GitHub as well.
So how did it come about? Why did you guys originally make this?
Foundation actually started, so Zurb's a studio first and foremost, a design consultancy. So
you serve clients.
Yeah, we serve clients. So our main like bread and butter is doing like MVP work probably for startups, and then also enterprises that want to feel more like startups. And so what you get with that is people need to produce ideas rapidly. They need to produce actual physical clickable things, clickable items they can get in front of users and test their hypothesis that that's correct, right? So Foundation came out of that. We noticed a while back that we were doing the same things over and over and over again, and we had produced for internal Zurb projects, which there's about 35 or 40 properties out there that Zurb manages and owns, this thing called the Zurb Style Guide. And we originally we realized people might, other people might benefit from this, and so we open sourced the whole thing.
Yeah. So that was one of the questions I had. Like, who do you feel is your ideal user? Like who do you imagine is using this when you're building it?
Yeah, I mean, it's anywhere. The over the course of the last couple of years, it really expands out in different ranges, right? So over here you might have. I know this is gonna sound weird. I know some of one of the owner's kids and one of his best friends, and they're 8, use Foundation to build things, right? Which is super cool. So anywhere from someone who's I heard the internet was awesome, to people just starting out on the web, or people who have been on the web for years, all the way up to people in enterprise companies who are developers who just need a quick way to get started and running, and then also a great way to keep consistency across a large group of people, right? So companies who are using Foundation benefit from the fact that everyone in the company knows that they have these sets of rules that they follow, and most of it's been figured out for them. Right.
And you guys are on number 5, right? Version 5?
We're on version 5. It's the 4th public version, if that seems weird. The other one was internal, but it was still we still call it Foundation internally.
Foundation. Yeah.
So it was it's the 4th public version. We're working on Foundation 6 right now, which is pretty exciting. So
do you have a date that's?
Oh, man.
No.
Like I said, we're a studio first, so you build.
Yeah.
When you have time to build or whatever. And I know that this week especially, we're really jamming away on it, and there's a lot of good ideas flowing. It's the ebb and flow of it. Next week it might be we have 2 hours to work on it, but this week I know we're all staying a little late trying to get things pushed out.
Yeah, so that was one of the biggest questions I had personally was, how do you make this thing economically viable? I know you guys sink a lot of resources into it, right? Time, energy, your talent. They're paying them to work on this thing that you're giving away for free. So first, thanks.
Yeah.
But how do you guys make that economically viable for your company?
That's it's a really philosophical question, but no, it is like that's kind of like the thought about open source, right? Which is like, how is open source effective and useful? And one, it's economically viable because we created it specifically for ourselves to improve our work,
right?
And so that was like first and foremost like why it was invented. So even if we never gave it to anyone else, we would have still been using it for ourselves, which sped up our development process,
saving money that way.
Now that's obviously not like the amount of money we spend fixing issues that aren't things that we've ran into and things like that. It is responsible for a lot of leads. A lot of people come to us because they know we're the makers of the foundation, so that helps as well. And then certain things like we do offer training, which is a very small fraction of that of that overall time. We do classes for people, and so that covers like a little bit of that time.
How would like let's say somebody wanted to get some Zurb training straight from the Zurb's mouth.
Yeah,
where would they go?
It's zurb.com/university.
Great.
And that has like online courses that we offer like live with the people who work on Zurb all the time, on Zurb products all the time, from anywhere from...
It's like a live chat with them or something?
It's a webinar, and then we have like question and answers after each one of the sections, and that's anywhere... You get the thing, that's fine.
I didn't like it anyway.
Yeah, that was just the worst. Let's just join in any of that. There's Q&A, and then there's anywhere from like classes on Foundation to our email, like creating HTML emails using ink.
So I was going to say you guys do much more than Foundation in terms of open source and like community driven things. Like you do, like I get an email blast from you guys, Ben.
Yeah,
sends me an email all the time. At first, I was like, "Who's Ben?" And then it was like Ben from Zurb.
There we go.
So, but yeah, it's like really, really helpful tips, like how to sketch, like how to do these things that I mean, they're not like talked about as much as how to code up Foundation, right?
Yeah. So actually, to be honest, like University next after Foundation is my favorite thing Zurb does, because there's those paid resources like the classes, but there's also tons of free resources on there.
Yeah.
From things like lessons that Ben does a really good job talking to each person in the company and finding things they want to like express and teach, and then he does a brilliant job writing those. And that's anywhere from code stuff like you're saying, like SAS, anything to like how to sketch certain things, how to like solve a problem using design. And then there's also a bunch of things called the library, which we're actually just finishing up a new version of, which is a combination of a bunch of resources that we put together. Things like Quips, which is a bunch of statistics that we've taken, put them into one place for you. So if you're ever like, I wonder how many people really use like carousels, we have a stat for that.
Oh, cool.
Triggers, which is like how to use psychology to manipulate people with design.
I want to stop you at Quips.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
How do people use that? How have you seen them using that?
We use it quite a bit in the sense of before we do like any redesign of a product or a site, we do like a site audit. And I'll usually encourage our designers to use quips in that and triggers in that, and say like, okay, right now you have a carousel. Carousels are usually ineffective for this reason. Attach a quip.
So when you're reporting to a client, giving a summary to them, or even a pitch to them, you'll have some like information to back up what your thesis is.
Exactly.
That's cool. I like that.
Or if there's like a design decision they're unsure about, they're like, I don't know, the fold, and people don't really scroll, and you can be like, well, there was a study done, and here's a chunk of information about it. It's on the internet, so it must be true.
Obviously.
And then
so where do you gather the quips?
We just do that manually ourselves. We find them all over the place from studies that are being done.
You're not conducting the studies yourself.
We're not conducting the studies ourselves.
Got it.
But we're finding those and putting them in one place for designers and developers. It's a cool site.
Yeah, I've been through it. It's really nice. So Foundation is probably the thing you guys are known most for, but you guys certainly do a lot. What's the biggest challenge you have in maintaining these large-scale projects?
I mean, there's probably a couple bigger challenges. Number one is, we kind of talked about it earlier a little, which is like the trade-off of time for client work versus the time of internal projects.
Right.
At any time as a designer, you probably have one or two external projects, and then one or two internal projects as well at Zurb.
Okay.
So that's probably the biggest thing, is just finding the time to do that and finding the time to make it useful. For Foundation, I would say even more than that is trying to be opinionated enough in your decisions of the framework.
Okay.
With balancing that with the needs of the users. So it's maybe a few, you have to kind of weed out like what's a few vocal minorities of like, we want this one thing, and it might not be that necessary. It might be something that maybe would be easier to have as an external plugin, or maybe isn't the best way to do that for the majority of users. And trying to take all those facts in, be opinionated about it, and then make a decision that affects the most people in the most positive way.
That can be quite a heavy burden to shoulder.
Yeah.
How do you make that decision? Are you guys gathering data from how many people use certain features, what to include, what to deprecate?
Yeah, actually, so for Foundation 6, we did actually a lot of, actually this is probably one of the first times we've done this on this scale, but we did a lot of like customer advocacy on this. So we reached out to people, especially a lot of agencies, a lot of big companies that used it, talked to them about like the components they use, what their like workflow is, what are things that they like could absolutely never live without. And we did a whole bunch of that. We took all that data, we sorted through it, we went through that, and we're trying to discover a lot of things that we can do better, and a lot of things that we can actually just inform people of better as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because a lot of some of the things you hear, you're like, we've been doing that for like 2 years. Apparently, we just didn't tell anyone. Which is like every component in Foundation is a mix-in, which is actually rare. Like the grid in most frameworks is a mix-in, but every component, which means that you can take any one of our components, create a class of whatever name you want, and then just include that component, and then now you have your own named version of that without having to worry about how we named that in any way.
Right. So it's a big responsibility not only to create these tools for everybody to use, but also to teach them how to use it with the docs and like making sure everything's explained clearly. And sometimes miscommunications can happen. I know that when I made a video about Foundation as a first-time user, and I was like, okay, this is how I think it happens. And then Rafi came in and commented. He was like, well, you know what? Like exactly what you were saying. We've been doing this for years, actually. You missed this little tidbit that would have made your life easier. And it's not an easy job for you guys.
Yeah.
So do you have a team making Foundation? I'm kind of wondering how you structure your organization. Do you have a team making it, team documenting it, doing client work?
Yeah, so Zurb as a whole, as of most recently, has been split up. This isn't how it's always been. All designers work on client work as well. Okay. And then all our designers also code. So when I say designer, those people are probably doing front-end code as well. We have a team of people working on Notable, which is our apps. Right. So like all our design feedback apps that we produce. We have a team working on the library kind of resources, doing those things. Then we have a Foundation team. And right now that team is 5 people, almost none of which are like full-time on it, but still 5 people who are actively debating, actively talking to each other. You'll be in the middle of doing some other work, and someone will tap you on the shoulder, and 5 minutes later on a whiteboard trying to figure out what that syntax is.
How long has the Yeti been a part of Foundation?
This is the first one.
Really?
If you go look at like the original Yeti from Foundation 2, first public one actually, it is like the creepiest thing you've ever seen in your life. Like I don't even know how we put that out there. Yeah. And then we have this awesome dude Adam Fairhead who builds all our mascots. And coolest guy, really good at like just taking feedback and making it. And he's been ever since I think 3 been doing our mascots, and they're a lot less creepy.
You certainly have a lot going on with Foundation. You split it into 3 products recently. What's the ultimate vision?
I think the ultimate vision is that the web as a whole does a lot of things, and having one framework that does all those things feels weird. Like I think in theory it feels nice because you're like, it's one thing, right? But then the one thing has to do these other things, has to do the other things.
You don't need everything all the time.
Yeah. So Foundation for Email is probably the biggest outlier in that. Foundation for Email is currently called Ink, and that's being brought back to the family. One of my favorite things to see on Twitter is like, hey, this thing is like Foundation for Email, or like, it's like, you're like, yeah, I know, we should have just called it that. But that's being split. That's being brought in. And, why not? And then we're trying to make it a little more consistent. We're actually doing some really neat stuff with that, where if you've used Ink, if you've ever had to code an email by itself, that's like the worst thing in the world. Using Ink is better than that, but still not amazing because there's still a lot of tables. Yes. We're working on a templating language for it, so you'll be able to code with it just like you would, closer to regular Foundation. Then we'll parse all that stuff out and make all the ugly table stuff for you.
I did see that. when we were here a few weeks ago on a Friday for a soapbox.
Oh yeah.
Someone was showing us like the prototype of that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
It's pretty nice.
It's really cool. I'm excited for it. When do you
Jeannie,
think the
whatever.
release? Yeah.
Probably before summer for that.
Not far.
Yeah, no, probably not that far. And then, but yeah, so that's Ink. We have Foundation for Sites, which is really good for making marketing sites and landing pages, and it does that amazingly well. And then we realized by making client projects, most of what we make are products. So digital products, right? Mm-hmm. We realized that Foundation and most frameworks weren't built to do that originally.
Can you just really, like 2 sentences, give me the difference between a site and a product?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So a marketing site is usually advertising some sort of product. Mm-hmm. So it's probably more text heavy, it's like a brochure more than anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Or a whole marketing site as a whole. And a product, often there is a blurred line, but a product is more interactive. I have to do more things. It feels more like the apps on my phone or more like the apps on my computer.
Right.
But we're trying to bring that back into the web. Foundation for Apps is great for that because it uses Angular, so it can really quickly create, swap content out without having a whole page reload.
Right.
There's components that are very specific and layouts that are very specific to apps, and we tried to create a grid and create components that help distinguish those from marketing sites. Not to say that you can't build an app in Foundation for Sites and you can't build a site in Foundation for Apps, but those are, for the most part, different enough that we felt they needed 2 different frameworks.
Right. And I haven't personally dived into Foundation for Apps yet, but I understand there's a difference in the grid. It's a Flexbox grid this time?
Yeah. So there's a Flexbox grid, and that's like the browser dependency on that is a little lacking, right? IE 10 and up.
IE 10 and up, yeah.
But hey, I mean, Microsoft just announced they're not even going to keep Internet Explorer in the family, right?
Big news.
But yeah, so it's a Flexbox grid, but more than that, even it's trying to figure out like how to create sectioned pieces of content like you see in a traditional iPhone app or even a traditional desktop one.
Right.
So independent scrolling panels were a big piece of that. Trying to have items fixed position vertically without actually having to fix position things, because mobile doesn't really dig fixed positioning. If you've ever seen like when you scroll and things like so the Flexbox grid is nice because it lets you do things like the golden layout that everyone always wants to do. Like every client always wants this thing to be 300 pixels like just fixed, and this thing just to fill the rest of the space.
Yep.
And that's a surprisingly hard thing to do with floats. You have to fix position a bunch of stuff and doing things. So it does that just on its own by default.
What do you envision for Foundation in the future? Not in the near, but like the
far future.
Give me 3 years.
That's something we talk about quite a bit.
Okay.
Because we're like, things are moving. Like we don't think we're gonna code forever, right? Or we'll probably code. We'll do backend. We'll probably do anything complex, but code may not be front-end code may not be in 3 years part of my everyday lifestyle. That we may have gotten good enough with kind of a WYSIWYG drag and drop thing. We hope that Foundation is a part of those types of things. We're looking at ways to do that. Yeah. That's not saying that is any way, shape, or form in any of our plans. And maybe even 3 years is a little less time for that. I feel like we haven't wanted to give it up. That's been the dream since Dream. We've pretended to promise that years ago. But you have nice things now, like Adobe's experimenting with it. With I think what is there? They have an app they're experimenting with it. Macaw is experimenting with that. Still a little shaky once you hit responsive. And then I think there's this new thing, Blocks, that looks pretty cool. A bunch of other ones. So that might end up being, at least for the prototyping stage. But I think when you eventually hit code, you're going to want that. I think farther in the future, frameworks right now have solved the problem of responsive for the most part. We've figured it out. But I think what we're going to see more of is trying to continue to refine frameworks so that they're just as efficient as starting from scratch.
Right.
So worrying more about efficiency. The near term for a lot of these things is accessibility has become a big thing on the table, which is great finally.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be a point where the same way 3 years ago maybe we looked at responsive design as not necessary, but now we do. Accessibility is going to be necessary, starting now and beyond. As you're not building accessible, you're kind of a jerk.
There's like an ethical line.
There is though, yeah. And Like, it's like if we didn't build buildings accessible, right? Like, if I was like, forget wheelchair ramps or anything.
Yeah, on the channel, we definitely, like, stress fundamentals a lot. I do anyway. And what struck me about, if I just go back to Zurb as a company, when I was talking to your people here when I was here the first time, it was mentioned that everybody at Zurb codes, even the HR people.
Yeah.
Like everybody.
We make that happen.
It's a requirement for the job, I heard.
Yeah. I mean, like that may be a slightly extreme, but like every designer codes, every engineer designs.
Okay.
Which is nice. So every engineer learns how to do sketching the way we sketch and learns how to understand the basic principles of design. It is true that our customer service people, anyone who's working on like the forum or anyone who's working on customer service in our products also knows how to code. And it's also true that I think currently our HR person is learning how to code because it's such a big part of our culture here.
That's awesome.
Everyone also, also a big part of that is sketching and being able to express ideas in a visual sense. Because verbally, ideas are kind of just a bunch of words. But once you have a concrete piece of paper that has a thing on it with a picture, that becomes a straight. So Zurb as a whole really does push like those two fundamentals of everyone codes, everyone sketches, everyone's a designer, everyone's a front-end dev.
That must really enable your team to communicate with each other.
Yeah, there's rarely a case in which, in fact, I like sometimes if I work as a design lead, so my job is kind of mentoring designers to make decisions, and sometimes we'll be talking and there's not a pen near, and I'll do this terrible thing, and I feel really bad every time I do it, but I'm really in my head, and I'll be talking, and I'm like, oh, what you want to do? And I'll just go, and the designers have learned that just like, grab a piece of paper and like shove a pen in my hand, and I go, okay, awesome, like this, and so and it's like terrible. But there's no
printer that ran out of ink.
Yeah, it's like, but there's really like no time that I can't explain something I'm thinking of, or that anyone can explain something to anyone else with a sketch.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good. Even just what about doing employee interviews like this? If we have this person go in a room here and then we do this thing and.
So I have a few questions. I shot out that on Twitter that I was stopping by today.
Awesome.
And a few people said, yeah, I'd like to ask them a few questions. So if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's do it.
This one comes Byte Node Code from @Byte Node Code.
Cool.
What inspired you to make your project theme the way you did?
Okay. That's actually a pretty common question. So Foundation by a whole is like really minimally styled. And that's by intent. For a design agency, we obviously understand design, but we wanted to make it so that you can skin it as easy as possible without having to overwrite almost any code that we do, either through a settings file or you have to, we want you to code this. We don't want a default necessarily theme going out that looks like Zurb Foundation. We want you to put design on top of it. So that's pretty much like the main thing that like when it goes into that is the default theme is as minimal as we can do. In fact, in the next version, we're working on even trying to figure out how to take some of the more specific things out, even. Still making it look good and nice to begin with, that if you're prototyping in it, you're okay.
Yeah.
But trying to figure out, okay, is this border necessary? Is this border, like if I don't want a border, now I have to undo that border? That seems a little annoying. So
as a creator of the Foundation framework, you have to kind of find ways to teach people to make it their own. Yeah. Built into the Foundation itself.
Yeah, what we notice a lot with like back-end devs is they're not as drawn to Foundation because they're like, well, I'd have to get a designer to do this, and we're like, you should have design. And the Valley's kind of putting more and more emphasis on design recently, so we think that's a good sign in that case, which is that you're going to see less and less of those like default framework themes going out, and more time spent on how do I make this thing look like our own, and also how do I use design to inform the interactions that need to take place in this page. Right. So if everything is just looks like everything else, then I have no way of letting people know what's more important, what's less important, and things like that. So,
awesome. Yeah. Cool. I got another one here from Tim. He's from @tbogdanov80.
Cool.
So. Any place in the future for web components in Foundation?
Yeah, I think so. Done. Foundation for Apps uses a bunch of directives, right? And we're experimenting with that. We like the idea of web components. I just don't think they're ready yet for most things. We're not against them. We're going to see where they go. Probably not in Foundation 6, possibly after that.
You guys have to have a pretty high standard for compatibility. So there's a lot to think of. You have to think of everybody else too, not just like what your requirements are.
Exactly.
It's a big.
It's a large undertaking, and I know there's people out there solving that very hard problem as well.
Speaking of which, I got another question from UK.
Okay.
I love these usernames. He says that IE8 is still very important to him and to others, and is there an easy solution?
There's actually, 90% of our projects we don't need ND5, probably actually higher than that. We don't need IE8, and mainly because we kind of put our foot down as a company and say, but also we do more high-tech stuff too. So if you're building stuff that's for, a different market or something, there are easy ways. We just recently did it on a project. There are we have a special grid that you install just for IE8. There's a couple things you do with swapping the version of jQuery. It's not too difficult. For the most part, we dropped IE8 actually in Foundation 4, which I think a lot of people forget.
Right.
So it's been a little while now, and we did it for the sake of we wanted to start that. We wanted to be the change in that situation.
Yeah.
Not wait for the change to happen, then do it. So we kind of took a hit on that, but we think it's an important stand to take and say, no more. The more people that support IE8, the more people are going to be on IE8.
Right.
So if everything starts becoming really broken for people, they're going to upgrade their machines and so
push the web forward.
Yeah, push the web. That's exactly. And we try to do that. We pushed responsive design at the very beginning. We pushed mobile first, definitely.
Yes.
When Luke W started talking about that, good old Luke W there.
Yeah.
I cannot pronounce his last name.
I don't even want to try.
And we started talking about that. We definitely hopped on that and started pushing that forward.
Yeah.
And we've seen pretty much REMs we're pushing forward right now. Every time we make a decision on that, we see the web kind of go along with that. And so that's kind of a responsibility thing. I get it. I've had to support IE8 before.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I first started designing, I was supporting IE 5.5, right? But
we don't want to talk about those days.
No, the worst.
Is there a guide or something?
There is a forum post.
Okay. Yes.
Officially, Foundation does not support IE8. We are not. There are Respond.js. I actually know other frameworks straight up are IE8 compliant because they use Respond.js, which is polyfill. But there also is on our forum, if you just type in IE8, there's probably a 30-page long thing, and finally one person at one point has aggregated all that into a big. The community has aggregated that into a big how-to of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'm so grateful for your time and energy and your knowledge on the subject.
Oh man, well thank you so
and
much
also
for coming out.
making Foundation.
Oh well.
Thank you.
I did not actually start the first Foundation, so let's get that out of the way. But continue to make it. Yes,
that's awesome. We appreciate it. So thanks you guys, everyone, for watching this, and leave a comment down below about your thoughts on frameworks and what you hope to see in Foundation and in other frameworks in the future. And if you get a chance, stop by Zurb.com. Right?
Yeah, Zurb.com.
Stop by Zurb.com. Check out their libraries. Check out their Foundation and everything that they have. A lot of it's free. Check out their tutorials, or what do you call it? Mentoring, or what do you call it?
Lessons?
Lessons.
Yes, lessons.
Check out their lessons also.
Those are actually, very good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And can you say keep on hacking?
Keep on hacking. Can I do that without a finger snap?
No, you keep the finger snap.
Keep on hacking, everyone.
All right. Thank you to Brandon and to everyone at Zurb for making this video possible, and also for making awesome things like Foundation and Zurb University and these really incredible things that are just free for us all to benefit from. Also, this video is made possible by the generous donations of these people in the Patreon community. As DevTip patrons, they enjoy a few perks like community projects and peer reviews of their work. It's really valuable stuff. If you are interested in being a patron, we'd love to have you. There's a link in the description, or there might be a little thing to click kind of above my head. All right, everyone, Brandon already said it, so you know that you need to keep hacking. And we'll see you next week.